I'm going to try and grab a talking hands video on what I do for soldering small electronics. I have a Taco FX888, the old analog ones. So my tip temperature is set right at 300. And what I'm going to be doing is soldering this fan to this DC converter. So this is the profile I use for the tip. I believe this is one of the original tips that came with the iron. Step one, clean it in the brass. If the tip is tinned, that would stay focused, it will accept solder and remain shiny. If it's not tinned, it'll behave like this back section, and the solder will bead up. So the tip of the end of the tips are usually clad with iron, and they will accept a solder ball like that. So it needs to have some solder on there in order to transfer heat between the iron and the joints that you're making. All of this smoke coming off, this is the flux burning out of the solder itself. So any of the solder that I have on there now is now useless for actually connecting things together because it needs the flux in order to make a good mechanical joint. So I'm going to clean that off and not let this sit there and smoke for another 30 seconds. So the first thing I want to do is hold the iron on the pad, and I'm going to get a little bit of, can I do this without, and close enough. So I'm touching the iron to the pad. I'm not pressing very hard, but I want the pad to heat up for about 2 or 3 seconds before I feed solder onto it. And I'm going to feed the solder into the area between the pad and the iron tip itself. So the chisel tip right there has a little cavity underneath it, so I'm actually targeting about here on it. So about there. And I'm just going to make a little ball on the board. So that, close, looks like that. I'll get the other side. So those pads are now tinned. They are ready to accept the actual wire itself. Now the wire, I stripped off 3 millimeters from the end of, come on, you can do it, there we go. I stripped off 3 millimeters from the end of the wire, but it's not tinned, this is just bare copper. So the first thing I have to do is get these wires tinned with solder. Its own, this is going to be a little harder. So this is the two-part. First you get a little bit on the iron itself to get good quick heat transfer into the wire. So I need a little ball there, and then start heating the wire. Now I'll do a really exaggerated job of this. You can kind of see solder just really doesn't want to behave. Like these peaks, that's because the flux burned off. If you're getting peaks on your soldering, you need to apply more flux. I can't apply more flux because my neighbor stole my flux, so I have to just wing it. The best way that I can wing it without a dedicated tube of flux is to just reapply solder as quickly as I can and use what's left in the actual solder itself. So heat. Oh, this is going to be a disaster. That about That's going to be terrible. So I'm going to be relying on the pads on the board to take up the rest of that slack. I'll tin the other side. This is a lot harder to do through a camera. Okay, so those, they're not great, but they will get the job done. So I'm going to go red to out, and for pads like this, you set the wire on top and then heat from the top down. Again, I'm going to go from the top down. So that is a solid joint. It's not perfect. What I would like to do is put a little drop or dab of flux on each one of those pads and reheat it and just let them melt again. For cleanup, I have, so what I'm looking to clean up here is the brown flux, which is kind of hard to see. There's not a bunch of it there. Most of it burned off. But that is just 70% ISO. So pads will shine up a little bit. And that's that.